What's up everybody? Noah with Madison Angling, and today's video, at least for me, is super exciting because we are putting the ice fishing stuff away. I'm sure I'm gonna have a couple more ice outings at some point this spring as the ice kind of goes away, but I'm not thinking about that. I am so ready to be done ice fishing, and today we are getting the boat ready to go for the 2020 open water season. And today's video is gonna be walking through a few of the things that I do to make sure my boat is ready to rock and I don't have to worry about anything the first time out. So I'm gonna show you guys the things that I look for, the things that I check, the things that I tighten up, and we're gonna get this thing ready to roll. Let's do it. All right, so the first thing that I check with my boat in the spring when I'm getting ready to go is my electrical systems. I check all of my batteries. Now, everybody's winterization process is different. I keep my boat in a heated garage, and my boat usually only sits for about 2 to maybe 3 months at the most. I usually fish through the winter if I can. I get out on Lake Michigan or some of the river systems. So my boat doesn't sit very long. But I have my boat in a heated garage. I have it plugged in on my onboard charger all winter long, and even though they're charged, ready to go, and I've never really had any issues with it, I take my batteries out and I take them in and have them tested. I have a local battery shop here in Cottage Grove called Northern Battery. They test batteries for free. A lot of battery shops do. So I pop mine out, take them in, have them tested, and bring them back, put them back in the boat. Now, doing that, another really important thing to do is make sure that you get your battery terminals nice and tight. Now, even if you're not actually going to be pulling your batteries out and testing them, at least make sure that you tighten down your battery terminals. If you have loose connections, a lot of times you can have arcs and sparks and all kinds of nasty stuff, and that can cause a lot of problems with your electrical system. So at least make sure that you tighten down your battery terminals. All right, so with our batteries checked, we know that they're fully charged, they're ready to go, they're in good shape. The next thing we're gonna do is turn on literally everything in the boat. Everything. We're gonna make sure all the electrical stuff works. So we're gonna roll over here, turn on the master power, all my accessory switches, even the two that aren't hooked up to anything. Turn on our lights, live well, bilge pump, make sure your pumps are running. That is hugely important and usually overlooked. Make sure your bilge pump's running. Make sure our graph turns on. I saw a little flash there. My outlets, I know those work because I had a bait bucket hooked up to those 2 days ago. Those are good to go. Another thing too, kind of getting ahead of myself here, but if you have a trolling motor like a Tarova or an Altera or anything like that that runs on, there we go, Humminbird, ready to roll, as always. If you have a trolling motor that runs with a battery operated remote, check your batteries on this. I'm at about 3/4 battery life, which is fine. I'll replace these at some point here, but make sure you check that, make sure that's working fine. Hummingbird's good to go. Awesome, we'll go ahead and shut that off. Bingo. Electrical system good to go. We're going to come back up to the front of the boat, and the next thing I do is I'm going to check the bolts holding the trolling motor onto the front of the boat. They do come loose over time, and it's something that can cause a lot of trouble later on if this thing really works its way loose. I go in, usually it's a 10mm wrench, and I tighten up the 4 bolts holding this mounting bracket onto the bow of the boat. Super important, because if this thing comes loose, not only can it damage, if you have a fiberglass boat, if this thing's loose and kind of rocking around, it can damage your gel coat, but it can also hurt the trolling motor because it's putting excessive torque on it as it's kind of shifting around. So make sure you tighten these bolts up. That'll be good to go. And I also have a stabilizer up here for the front of the head of the trolling motor. I check those bolts as well to make sure those are nice and tight. And while we're tightening stuff, while we got our screwdrivers and wrenches and stuff handy, I go through, I check all of my rod holders. So I got my Scotty mounts, my tight lock mounts. I also, since I have access to the rails on this, I get underneath and I actually tighten up the rails. Make sure my rails are tight. My downrigger mounts, those are nice and tight. My cleats, literally any piece of hardware in this boat, I tighten up to make sure everything's nice and tight. Even screws. I have a couple little screws here holding this piece in. I have some screws that are holding this front piece in here. I check all those, tighten them up. Also, depending on what kind of boat you have, if you own a Tuffy boat like I do, they have these little plastic screw head covers. You can get these at any hardware store for like, I don't know, they're like 20 cents a piece, not even. I think they're like 15 cents a piece. Go ahead and replace those. This is a nice boat, and it looks kind of janky because it gets used a lot more than most normal boats. So go through, check those, tighten your screws up, and make sure your hardware is all nice and tight. You're not going to have any nasty surprises your first time out. All right, so we've got the electrical stuff all squared away. That's all good to go. We've got all of our hardware connections, all of our bolts and nuts and screws and stuff. Those are all nice and tight. The next thing that I check that a lot of people probably don't check is your plug. Everybody has a different plug in their boat. I know there's a lot of boats, especially Rangers, older Rangers have like a brass screw that just screws in, that's your plug. There's other boats that have like the old school rubber plug thing that you push in and you flip the little latch and it puts tension on it and expands into the hole. I hate those, but if your boat takes one of those, just go buy a new one. Don't even use the one you used last year. Go buy a new one. They're like $3 or $4. Don't even bother. Why take the risk? Buy a brand new one. My boat has this style of plug. It has kind of the plastic threaded part. Ooh, we got some leaves in there. And this little gasket, this little O-ring here. Check your O-ring if you have this style of plug. Make sure that when you put your plug in, it's nice and tight. You kind of hear that? It's getting in there nice and tight. That means it's going to be watertight. We're not going to have any leaks. If it's loose, it's not fitting really super snug, or you see any dry rot on that O-ring, replace it. It's not a big deal. Super cheap fix. It's going to save you a lot of headaches. So make sure you check your plug. Make sure everything's in good shape there. All right, since we're still in the back of the boat, we're going to check one more thing while we're back here before we get to the engine, and that is our transducer. We want to make sure our transducer is working properly. So we're going to go back over here. Okay, graph's firing up. All right, sonar is running. We'll come back here. Snap, snap, snap. Perfect. Your transducer should be making noise, and it is. So the transducer is good. We know our graph is working. On to the next step. All right, so at this point, we've got the batteries checked out, hardware's tightened. We know that our graph is working, our plug is in good shape. We know that our bilge pump and our live well are working, the lights work. Now is something that a lot of people put off, or they just don't even bother with because they think, oh, I don't tow my boat that much. It's not going to make that big of a difference. Trust me, things can go horribly, horribly wrong if you don't take this one simple step very seriously, and that is checking your trailer bearings. Get in there, pop the wheel off, jack it up first, obviously. Take the wheel off, get in there, pack your bearings. Mine are already done. I do mine at the end of the season, and at the same time, I check my brakes. If your trailer has brakes, I have trailer brakes. I check my tires for any uneven wear. These ones are in great shape, and I repack both bearings. Do both bearings. Most boats, especially bigger boats, are going to have 2 bearings in each hub. Make sure you take the time to pull them both out, inspect them for any corrosion whatsoever. Any corrosion at all. Even if there's just 1 or 2 little pitted spots in the bearing surface, replace them. Just be done with it. That stuff spreads. It doesn't ever get better. Just look at your vehicle, look at your truck. You get a rust spot, if you don't fix it immediately, it's toast. It's gonna get worse. So same thing happens with your trailer bearings. Make sure you get in there, check your bearings. It doesn't take that long. It's not a big deal. Sure, your hands will get a little goopy. You'll get some stuff on them, but make sure you get in there, check those. It's gonna save a lot of headaches and a lot of money if you do that right away. All right, of course, the last part of this whole system is we're gonna check our lights. We're gonna check brake lights. We're gonna check turn signal left, turn signal right, and we're also gonna check the running lights, make sure the running lights are working. So let's take a look, let's make sure everything's working. All right, we are to the final and probably my most favorite part of this whole process, and that is getting the motor fired up. When you start your motor, let it idle, especially if you have a 4-stroke. I have a Mercury 4-stroke. If it's been sitting a long time, the oil kind of settles down to the bottom of the engine. You want to give it some time just at idle to get the oil back up into the cylinder heads, make sure it's working through the cams, the valve train, make sure the oil has a chance to make it through. Now, if you don't have a 4-stroke and you have a 2-stroke, I would say the same thing kind of applies until the engine kind of gets up to temp and you're able to move that oil and fuel through the entire crankcase, the entire system. Don't rev it. Let it just idle, let the oil and everything kind of work its way into all the seals, into the bearing surfaces. Make sure you give it a chance to warm up and lubricate. Depending on how you winterize your engine, you could have a ton of smoke coming out of your exhaust. My engine gets some stay-bill added to it, some fresh fuel, and like I said, it only sits for a couple of months, so I don't do a ton of fuel stabilization. I don't fog it. I don't do anything like that with it. If you have a two-stroke and you fog your engine, be prepared for a ton of exhaust smoke to come out of it. That's totally normal. You're burning off that excess oil from the fogging process, but make sure you run it out, get all that fogging oil out, and typically you don't want to run your boat for more than 10 to 15 minutes at the most on muffs. That's kind of the rule of thumb. You don't want it to go much longer than that. It just doesn't usually adequately cool the system, so running it on muffs, 10 to 15 minutes at the most, and that should be all you need to get your motor started. So we're gonna make sure this thing's ready to go. The end of the season, I always change my oil. I change the lower unit lube. If you haven't done that yet, usually you should do that in the fall before you put the boat away. In case there's any water in the crankcase, then you know, hey, I've got a problem. I need to fix that. Otherwise, if you have water trapped in there, obviously it freezes, it expands, it can crack things, it can really mess stuff up. So I already have all that stuff done. All we should have to do is hook this thing up to the water, turn the key, and it should fire right up. So let's do it. My favorite part, let's make this thing purr. So one other thing that you might want to keep in mind, particularly if you run a two-stroke engine, so if you're running a Pro XS, an Optimax, or an E-Tech, make sure that you check the auxiliary oil reserve inside of the engine. Make sure that tank is full. I don't have that because this is a four-stroke, but if you do run a two-stroke, especially an oil-injected two-stroke, make sure you check that auxiliary tank, make sure it's full. Otherwise, this thing might beep at you, it might freak out. Make sure you check that. It'll save you a lot of headaches when you're on the water and your engine keeps freaking out at you. So check the auxiliary oil tank. All right, guys, we have full water pressure. Make sure you turn your hose on, full pressure, so we got the maximum amount of water making into the cooling system. First thing I do is I prime my fuel pump. All right, we turn the key, you can hear the fuel pump running. Runs for about 6 seconds or so. I'll shut it off. Give it a second. Prime it again. This way we're working any air out of the system, ensuring that this thing fires up right away. Do it one more time. Let it run, let it run. All right, here we go. Favorite part of this whole process is hearing that thing fire up. So we're gonna let this thing run about 10 minutes. It might smell a little funny, especially if you have some kind of a fuel stabilizer in it like I do, but we're gonna let this thing idle. We're not gonna rev it. We're gonna give it a good 10 minutes to just idle, let it warm up, come up to temperature, make sure the thing keeps peeing, make sure our water pump's in good shape, and then we'll probably give it a little gas, make sure it revs, make sure it goes in and out of gear, and we should be ready to get on the water here any day now. All right, guys, motor's been running for about 10 minutes. It's still peeing, it's idling great. We're gonna go ahead and throw it in gear. We'll throw it in forward. Awesome. Throw it in reverse. Perfect. And we'll give it a little bit of gas. Beautiful, nothing blew up. Of course it wouldn't, it's mercury. Peeing fine, idle's great, cooling system's working. Just like that, we are ready to rock. We are officially into the open water 2020 season. Hopefully we're gonna be out in the boat now. No more ice fishing videos, no more how-to videos. We're gonna get this guy out on the rivers here soon, chasing walleye, sauger, and maybe do some Great Lakes stuff. Hopefully get out for some trout, maybe some coho salmon. I don't know what we're gonna do, but it's officially time to break the boat out. Hopefully this video was helpful. Hopefully it helps you guys get your boats ready to rock for this upcoming open water season. And leave me some comments below. Let me know other things that you guys do to get your boats ready for the open water season. Could be something useful for me, and if it's a useful tip, I'll share it with everybody else. Maybe we can film it. So, till the next video, don't know what we're gonna be doing, but it will be fishing. It better be in the boat, and we will see you on the next video.